Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. You may have noticed that there is no rabbi here today. Myrna loved being Jewish, except for the way. So those speaking today will just be family and friends. As many of you know, Myrna was somewhat insecure, and she worried about how she'd be remembered at her funeral. She reminded us frequently that she had saved cards and letters from former students, colleagues, and friends, extolling her virtues and singing her praises, in case we could not think of enough positive things to say about her. I think we all know that that won't be a problem today. My brother Russell didn't feel that he'd be able to stand up here and speak, so he has written something, and I'm going to read it on his behalf. Since I know that I couldn't get up here and talk, I've asked my sister to speak for me about my mother. She was a wonderful mother, grandmother, and most of all, she was a wonderful and loving wife to my father, Neil. If you look up the definition of true love in the dictionary, you will come across their picture every time. He was everything to her. Her life revolved around his care, and she did a marvelous job taking care of him. She gave me a gift that is not material. She gave me an extra 20 years with my father. She was his nurse, stunt driver, chauffeur, and concierge at all the area hospitals. Without her, my dad would never have been at my wedding or seen his grandchildren, Rachel, Allie, and his namesake Nicky, born. I don't know anyone else who could have handled that with the grace and strength that she did. Thank you, Mom, for that gift. On March 3rd, 2005, we lost my dad. He died in my mother's arms, exactly where he was meant to be. A part of my mother died with him that day. Her heart was broken. She used to wake up in the middle of the night and turn over, hoping to see him. And she'd cry knowing he wasn't by her side anymore. She loved him, and he loved her. What was not to love about her? She was the Da Vinci of mothers. She could do anything: paint, calligraphy, write poetry, bake, help my friends with their homework. You name it, she could do it, and she did it well. I can't say she was only caring towards her friends and family, because that is just too limiting. It was with everyone she had contact with. I remember one day she told me she had to get up early so she could see the trash collectors. I said, "Mom, why don't you take out the trash the night before?" She said that one of the men had just become a father, and she wanted to give him a gift for his baby. That is just scratching the surface regarding her generosity. Waiters and waitresses across the area had smiles on their faces as soon as she sat down. One of the waiters from her favorite restaurants actually went to visit her in the hospital. I saw that one time before, but that was in the movies. And she's not Jack Nicholson, and he wasn't Helen Hunt. She cared for everyone, and people respected and admired her for that. I thought she was just crazy, but who am I to judge? It made her happy. She used to say, "What difference does it make?" And you know, she was right. She had a terrific sense of humor. She could be funny, but she could also be intellectually funny. How do you say the word intellect without thinking of her right away? Her name is synonymous with it. She was hands down the most intelligent person I have ever known. The New York Times crossword puzzle never stood a chance. And then to rub it in, she started doing them in pen. What Myrna was and always will be is a teacher. It wasn't just through her intelligence, but her actions, the things she would happily do and the lengths she would go to for people she cared about. In every aspect of my life, I have learned from her, and I want to thank her. Lyrics from the song "Kind and Generous" by Natalie Merchant to me really sums it up. You've been so kind and generous, I don't know how you keep on giving. For your kindness, I'm in debt to you. For your selflessness, my admiration, and done, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for so many gifts you gave with love and tenderness. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your generosity, the love and the honesty you gave me. I want to thank you, show my gratitude, my love, and my respect for you. I want to thank you. Thank you, Mom, for setting the bar high for me, and we hope one day just to graze it. One of my mother's oldest friends, and I mean oldest in terms of longest, not in terms of age, is Natalie Zeiger. Natalie and her husband Dick could not be with us today. They're out of the country. But Natalie was kind enough to write something, and Minna Moskowitz, a mutual friend of Natalie and my mother's, has volunteered to read it, so I'll ask Minna to please come on up now.
This piece was written with love by Natalie Zeiger. I lost a friend. She was a terrific woman. It is very sad. I think of Myrna as a young woman, slender, helpful, caring, full of enthusiasm, sharing her warmth. She was like a beautiful tree in bloom, giving shade, a place of peace, and something lovely. Unfortunately, we were all unaware that some of the leaves started to fall from our lovely tree. Ever so slowly, we were beginning to lose the comfort of our friend. But I sort of swept up the leaves, put them in a memory box, and I know that Myrna would be wrapping them in perfectly understated paper with a lovely ribbon, maybe a dried flower, and a carefully calligraphied note. You see, Myrna was special. She had so many gifts and talents. She was such a nurturing person, creative, intelligent, and fun. I met Myrna about 60 years ago. We were young teachers taking our masters at Brooklyn College. Everyone met in the cafeteria eating their usual snacks, but not Myrna. Her afternoon pleasure was a bowl of mashed potatoes. No one had the eating habits of my good friend. Maybe some Twinkies, always lettuce and chicken, and on a good day, there was a bagel. With this calcium-free diet, she did not have osteoporosis, so there you go. We not only shared our work together, but we also had the run of dinner parties, raising kids, and also vacations. Did you ever go to a 2-star hotel in the Catskills and hear Neil sing through the paper-thin walls? We did have fun. There were times that I was angry. She did the Sunday Times crossword puzzle in full, while I was still figuring out the upper left-hand corner. What a mind. I would hear stories about her life in Brooklyn, the little apartment shared with her family, and the closeness of her cousins Muriel and Bobby. She loved to reminisce about Empire Boulevard, the Dodgers, Ebbets Field, and Ebingers. Thank goodness she had this, because in a way, these memories got her through the latter part of her life and the terrible disease that took her from us. My Myrna was a Brooklyn girl, ever aware of where she came from and thankful for where she was. Her home, her husband, her children, Lisa and Russ, their spouses, her grandchildren, and the riches of her life. She never took those for granted. No material girl, our Myrna. No labels for her. A stroll through Annie Says was a perfect day out. Myrna loved to read. She shared a lifetime of books, and she loved her book clubs. Up until sometime last year, she was still getting to the meetings. Either Grace or I would pick her up, and she did or did not participate. And if she could get the conversation to an old-time movie about Cary Grant or perhaps Paul Newman, the men of her fantasy, she could have one heck of a conversation. And at the end of the day, she always said, "Thank you, I love you." You know, we, that is both couples, went to the movies just about every Friday night. And around the table at dinner, we would have the best time catching up over scrambled eggs, a salad, and the lettuce and bagel plate. We had such a good time. I lost a friend, someone who would be there for you or me when life was a nasty curve. She took care of her children, her grandchildren, her brother, and a myriad of others who didn't even have to ask. I lost a friend who sprinkled some kind of special fairy dust on Newport Road. Because she had the best neighbors in the world. They loved her, made sure that there was food in her house, and took her on errands. I lost someone to hang around with, to call when I just felt like it, to be comfortable, to have a good laugh, to cry, or just be happy. I lost a friend who was loyal, honest, and modest. The last time I saw Myrna at the Green, she was in the day room, dressed, well-groomed, and in a wheelchair. It was difficult to communicate with her, but I just kept on talking. When it was time to go, I kissed her, she looked at me, and she said, "Thank you, I love you." What a loss. For those of us who believe, Myrna is finally at peace. For all of us, just dip into my or your memory box of leaves, take a part of Myrna, hold it to your hearts, and she will be with you forever. I just wanted to say just a few words on my own. I really truly believe that life is all about luck. And those of us who were lucky enough to teach at PS 115 in Brooklyn were extremely lucky. And you know what? We all knew it. Myrna's morning coffee, payday parties, birthdays, and retirement celebrations were all hosted by our wonderful friend and colleague, Myrna Thomas. Much of Myrna's existence revolved around PS 115. She loved her students, her fellow teachers, and her library. And we revolved around Myrna's warmth and inclusive nature. She made us all feel at home in her home at 115. We will miss her, but we know in our hearts how lucky we were to really know her. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joel, son of Elizabeth. I'm Myrna's son-in-law. Myrna spent many summers up in a community in upstate New York in Lake Luzerne called Fourth Lake. The community was populated, or is populated, by many close friends and families going back 50 or 60 years to Neil's parents. One of those friends, Joel Mark, wrote a eulogy that he asked us to read for him if he couldn't be here. So I'm reading Joel Mark's eulogy. Myrna was a dear friend of mine, if only for the last 20 years. She exemplified grace and equanimity, poised in any and all settings. She took me in as a friend when I came into membership in Fourth Lake. From the moment I met her as an adult, I felt I was in the presence of a benign spirit. All I knew at that point was that she was beautiful. She initiated me into the fabric of Fourth Lake. The mornings at Gladys's and fueled by bottomless hospitality and a Mr. Coffee, we talked and laughed. How wonderful that was. What an opportunity for me to remember what we knew. Limited in my case mostly to what I knew as a child or heard from my mom and dad. So I owe it to our dear circle and to Myrna that I was able to learn more of the social history of Fourth Lake and help me fill in the blanks. When I think of Myrna, I think how gracious, how generous, with time and her readiness to promote happiness and community. I remember her behind the bar serving at community events. To this day, I wouldn't know where all the napkins are if the gals hadn't shown me the ropes. She was sociable. I hope some of it rubbed off on me. She has nice-sized boots to fill. I remember her sitting with Gladys, great friends at the beach, and watching the action from high up on the beach, but you couldn't get her into the water. She had such a lilting, laughing way of turning down the invitation to swim, that when you went, you walked into the water with the happiness from Myrna's radiating goodwill. Way back, when I was young, all I knew of Myrna was that she looked pretty, and that Mom said she was mutually in love with her husband, Nicky. And then the loss that I certainly sensed she never really got over. When she spoke, you felt that he was her hero, and certainly had to be his, the focus of his tender love. They had each other in a loving, generous family. I am grateful for knowing Myrna. She always invited me to New York to come and stay at her home in Eulogy. I wish I had stopped off and had a last visit with my dear friend. I feel a great love and a great debt of gratitude for knowing this wonderful, luminous being. If we had a peerage, she would be a dame, a smart and kindly dame, and a blessing on us all. Shalom, Joel. Now, a very close friend of Myrna's, Tony. Thank you.
Not the last name.
First of all, my condolences to Lisa and Russ and your entire family. I truly know what your loss is. For 28 years, I was the Goyish member of the family. I spoke more Yiddish than I did Italian. And when I had agita, I said, "Oy vey, what's the source?" And Myrna would laugh. I met Myrna in 1972, and in 1973, we became the closest of friends. During the years Myrna and I shared together, we jokingly agreed to write each other's eulogy, and always added something to it to be remembered. Most of them were humorous. Well, I no longer believe in eulogies, simply because the person you want most to hear the words never get to attend. So let's agree that this is a non-eulogy. I am here today for the same reason you all are. I love, in the present tense, Myrna Thomas. I must have, because she managed to coerce me into playing Scrabble with Neil. Each time having my ass handed to me, and yet she persuaded me into going back for more. Myrna was the sister I never had. She was my mentor, my muse, my protector. She provided me with shelter when I least deserved it. In other words, she was my best friend. She was creative, witty, and brilliant. She did the Times crossword every day. She even managed to convince me that the components of a balanced diet could be summed up in one word: chocolate. And if you don't know that, you don't belong here. She was also the best educator I have ever met. My wife Angie, who sadly can't be here today, and Myrna also became best of friends. They are the two most generous people I have ever known. This presented a conundrum. How do we give Myrna a gift that she could not manage to top in return? We never found the answer, and our home benefited from it tremendously. One of the last times Myrna visited us in Rhode Island, she took the train to Providence carrying with her a huge box. When I picked her up at the station, I said to myself, here we go again. It seems that Fortunoff's was closing its doors, and naturally Myrna was there to help. When we opened the box, we found it contained about 15 of the most gorgeous Christmas balls we had ever seen. So every Christmas since then, and for as long as we will live, it is debatable as to whether we decorate the tree with our Christmas balls, or do we buy a tree just to display them. Over the years, Myrna and I have many, many deep discussions, a large proportion of those centered around religion. After all, I was a devout Catholic and she was a devout atheist. And if that's not an oxymoron, I have no idea what it is. A few years after Neil passed away, I visited Myrna in Eulogy. She seemed depressed, so I suggested that we drive over to the small park along Sunrise Highway and watch the ducks and just hang out. Once again, we began to discuss our views about God, and she expressed her belief that the universe was in total chaos. I responded to her by saying, if the universe is in such chaos, how do you explain the two of us sitting here on this bench and our friendship that has lasted over 30 years? She just smiled. Once Myrna expressed to me her belief that when you die, it's all over. Poof. Well, I'm here to prove that she's wrong. Not by telling you that Myrna is up there at the great marinara in the sky, or holding a celestial table at Dards while talking to Irene. You had me there. But because Myrna is alive here today, in me, just as she is alive in all of you. She is also alive in every student she ever touched, and unknown to them, in some way, every generation that will ever follow them. It will go on exponentially, like the ripples in a lake, like the waves in the ocean. She's made herself immortal. And with that belief, I will end this non-eulogy by borrowing the title of a song from one of the romantic World War II movies Myrna loved so much, and simply say to her, until we meet again.
For those who don't know, I'm Rachel. I'm Myrna's oldest granddaughter. My grandmother was many things. A mother, a teacher, a baker of the world's best cream puffs. But mostly, to me, she was an artist. When I think back on my childhood, it's her art, her creativity, that stands out in my memories. The cartoon character drawing she'd make me for my birthday, every year until I was 9. The calligraphy lessons she attempted to give me when I was 12. The books of optical illusions and paintings made on human hands, shown to me every time I walked into her house. There were the boxes of sand art, the machines for blowing bubbles, the delicate, graceful way she'd frost cakes and dip chocolate onto strawberries. Everything that made Myrna who she was came down to her art, her creativity, her passion, her desire to pass it on to others, to share what she cared about most with those she loved. To know my grandmother was to know her art, even if you didn't realize it. Spend 10 minutes with her, and you'd inevitably hear about the gorgeous cupcakes she just made, or the table settings she just designed, or the faces she swore she saw in the trees across the way, even if you had no idea what she was talking about. It didn't matter that she was never a professional, or that her greatest love was actually teaching. Art was who she was, an essential part of her being. It showed in her passion, her deep, all-encompassing love for the things she felt mattered. Sometimes this was her family or her home. Other times, it was the George Bush toilet paper she gleefully kept stocked in the house. And it showed in her thoughtfulness, her inability to overlook any detail, no matter how small. Irritating at times, of course, but also so touching and so kind. When you spoke to Myrna, you knew you were heard. And it showed, most of all, in her grace. Her ability to befriend every person she met, or her adamant refusal to say dirty words, or, as happened one memorable weekend when it was just the two of us, her ability to clean up a disastrously messy house in 20 minutes' time without breaking a sweat. There were the Audrey Hepburn movies she collected and adored, the gorgeous scarves she bought but rarely wore, the fondness with which she would recall adventures in Brooklyn and dates with my grandfather. Myrna was the most elegant woman I've ever known, but it wasn't easy. She did, after all, raise a family who loved noise and messiness and convincing her to say the word fart. She'd look on in horror as we stuffed our faces with ice cream and cake. She'd pretend not to listen whenever her son and her son-in-law argued over their bodily functions. The one time I heard her burp, she looked like she wanted to cry. She loved us all, of course, but often liking us took great effort. Part of it was her stubbornness. Anyone who knew Myrna knows that she was one of the most persistent women you'll ever meet. She loved what she loved and hated what she didn't. Once she made her mind up, no amount of arguing or reasoning could convince her otherwise. Sometimes this was a good thing. Just ask Barbara Streisand, whose fan base probably tripled during Myrna's lifetime, or her beloved Brooklyn Dodgers. Other times, though, her stubbornness could be exasperating. Tell her that Milky Ways were bad for you, or that George Clooney was looking a little bit worse for wear, and you'd be in for it. Mention anything anti-Democrat, and you'd never hear the end of it. When I was 8, I told her I wanted to vote Republican, and she nearly cried. When I explained it was just because my name also started with an R, she still needed a full minute before she could look me in the eye. It's so easy to forget these things, to forget who my grandmother was. The last few years have seemingly overshadowed everything, and it's difficult not to think of her through the lens of her dementia. But when I remember her, I think only of the grandmother I grew up with. A gifted, strong-willed, open-hearted woman who'd give anything to the one she loved, whose greatest desire was to see her passion and her imagination reflected in her son and her daughter and her granddaughters. It didn't matter if we never picked up a paintbrush, or if we couldn't bake to save our lives, or if we'd rather watch The Avengers than her beloved Roman holiday. What mattered was that we cared, that we were inspired, that we took the love and the passion and the strength that she showed us, and we made them our own. My grandmother was not a vain woman. She hated being photographed, never wore much makeup, and would have happily given her granddaughters all of her nicest pieces of jewelry if someone hadn't stopped her. But she was proud, and rightfully so. She knew she had created something incredible. A family who loved and liked each other most of the time. Friends who would travel miles to see her and talk for hours on the phone. A husband with whom she shared a great enduring love up until the day he died. It was an extraordinary accomplishment, and Myrna knew it. She was so proud. And we were so proud of her. The name Myrna Thomas connoted respect. Everyone admired her for her talent and her intelligence and her class. It wasn't limited to age or gender or anything like that. I have equally vivid memories of the awed looks on my classmates' faces when she came in to teach us lessons one day in kindergarten, and those of the assisted living aides who saw the paintings she made when they were hung up in her room last year. Whether you knew her for an hour or for a lifetime, it didn't matter. If you knew her at all, she earned your respect. It was such a privilege to be her granddaughter, to be related to someone so admired and so loved. I learned so much from simply being around her. How to be a good friend, how to earn people's trust, how to make everyone, no matter how old, feel heard and respected and significant in your eyes. These were valuable lessons taught by the best teacher one could ever have. Myrna always wanted her family to take what she'd shown us, to exhibit the same empathy and earn the same respect. Be creative, she told me. Be curious, be kind. Find the beauty in the world and notice it. Share it with those you love. Be the kind of person friends call for support and students still write after 20 years. Be a teacher, be an artist. It's the only life she knew how to live, and she lived it beautifully. Now I'd like to ask Linda Kaplan, her former student and fellow teacher, to speak.
Dear Myrna, how do I say goodbye to someone who has been part of my life since I was 10 years old? I can still remember my first day of 6th grade when a beautiful young woman came into room 302 to greet her new and bit apprehensive class. That was the beginning of my favorite year in school and my inspiration to become a teacher. You were so kind, so smart, so creative, and so special in every way, and that's how you remained throughout your life. You were the heart and soul of PS 115. Without you, there would never have been payday luncheons, fundraisers, art fairs at Merrill, a great library, daily breakfast, and lots of parties. Without your hard work, generosity, and sense of humor and devotion to 115, it would not have been such a treasured memory for all of us, teachers and students alike. Myrna, you always did for others and never asked for anything in return, with one small exception. Many years ago at your retirement party, and so many years after, you made us all promise one thing, that this retirement speech that was read at your party would be read at your funeral. You enjoyed listening to every heartfelt word and felt, well, a promise is a promise, and here is the speech that Muriel read to you then. June 27, 1995. Over the years, Myrna and I have spoken just about everything under the sun. But one day, discussing our funerals, Myrna made it very clear that she doesn't want to be buried and doesn't want to be cremated. She would rather be dipped in chocolate. And then she asked that I deliver this at her service. Well, this retirement speech is perfect because I get to give it as a eulogy. She gets to hear it, and then she gets to go home and go about her business as usual. I have known Myrna all my life, and I knew that she was smart. I knew she was creative, but when I started teaching at 115, I realized she was a master teacher as well. Many of her former students, like Linda, still regard her with admiration, a little awe, and a great deal of love. They show up for years and years, later treasuring memories of the time spent with her, plays, magazines, projects, which many of them save today. Myrna is the perfect teacher, innovative and exciting, instilling confidence in all her charges. But she's been more than that to 115 and to everyone she knows. I have never known her to refuse a favor. She was always there to comfort anyone who was upset, come with a thoughtful idea to celebrate someone's occasion, and to help anyone in trouble. Myrna's selflessness and generosity are legendary. There are countless books on the shelves of the library that were bought and paid for with her own money because there was no funding, but she just knew that the children would love them. Everyone who has met Myrna knows that she is the ultimate lady. Gentle, soft-spoken, always considerate, and amazingly, she combines this with a moral sense and a will of steel. I have never known her to overlook an injustice of compromise of her ideals. She is fiercely loyal, eminently fair, and not a drop of malice in her. Now, I don't want you to get the idea that Myrna is perfect, because she could also be very irritating. She can not only knock off every New York Times crossword puzzle without breaking a sweat, but invariably finishes each acrostic, diagramless, and even the cryptics. And if that's not enough, she can add the tip and divvy up a lunch 7 ways in her head in 3 seconds. But most irritating is her ability to remember everything that has happened since World War II, including every store that stood on Kingston Avenue in 1949. Believe me, it's sometimes not easy to hang around with her. Well, I've known Myrna quite literally since the day I was born, and I could say without equivocation that she's the most brilliant, loving, compassionate, generous, and honorable human being I have ever known. And the greatest tribute is that I can stand here celebrating her retirement while my heart is breaking that she is leaving 115. That was the speech. And now Myrna has left us for good. But Myrna, we will all be happier and better people for having known you. You'll be in our hearts forever.
I am not here to honor a mother-in-law. Somehow adding a suffix to the word mother seems to diminish the importance of the word. Myrna never treated me like a son-in-law, or Beth like a daughter-in-law. We were never anything less to her than a son or a daughter. She was never anything less to us than a mother. So I'm here to honor a woman who was a mother to us with everything that entails. That includes arguments, disagreements, and affections. There were plenty of all three. Those of you who knew Myrna well knew that she had a very inflexible worldview with very inflexible opinions. If you were a Republican, you were by definition an uncharitable person. If you were religious, there were gaps in your thought process. Of course, she would never, in a million years, treat you any differently. She was too kind a person for that. Being kind was also part of her worldview. It was amazing that someone so opinionated was also someone for whom being nice was so important. She was careful never to insult or in any way hurt someone's feelings. Being a good person, not due to a religious imperative, but instead her own self-imposed moral code, was at the very center of who she was. It's as if she made the conscious decision at some earlier point in her life that if she was going to embrace atheism, then her moral center would have to come from within and be unyielding. And it was. Myrna was an artist at heart and developed kindness into an art form. One of the only times I remember her losing her temper with a stranger was when some woman had cut her off and taken her parking spot at the Peninsula Boulevard Shopping Center. She was furious. So in her fury, Myrna whipped out a pen and left a note with the following staggering insult on the person's windshield. "You are rude and inconsiderate." Needless to say, we were all shocked at her display of temper. Such displays of temper were otherwise unheard of. When we flew to Paris together shortly after Neil's passing, she spent the entire transatlantic flight in a horribly uncomfortable position because she felt it would be rude to the person behind her to even part way lean her seat back. She loved her family. For them, particularly her grandchildren, she would do anything. Myrna never met a vegetable she liked. In fact, she avoided them her whole life. But in a restaurant, when asked by her then 3-year-old granddaughter, who had been trained by some unknown person to say, "Grandma, eat broccoli for me, she popped in a piece without missing a beat. Myrna and I had many arguments, some lighthearted, some not so. To her, I was practically a right-wing extremist. That I would even consider voting for a Republican candidate for president was a deep character flaw, even though I actually never did vote Republican. But we also had a lot of fun. I remember when Rachel was born, Myrna was waiting nervously, many of you may recognize this as her default state, in the hospital waiting room. After the birth, I walked towards the waiting room with a Paddington bear, actually sitting over here, wrapped in a blanket in my arms. I motioned to Myrna to come over, pointing to the bundle I was holding. As she approached, I gently tossed it across the room to her. Needless to say, she was not amused. But she could give as good as she got. One time we were upstate in our summer home in Forth Lake, where she spent many summers in the company of close friends. I don't remember the specifics, but we had made some bet, possibly regarding movie trivia or some wordplay. Somehow, I won the bet. The wager that if I won, she would give me a foot massage. Relishing my victory, and perhaps rubbing it in a little, I discarded my socks, anticipating my hard-won prize. Myrna briefly excused herself, and before I can get too concerned that she was going to renege on the bed, she returned and proceeded to give me my foot massage, wearing thick rubber cleaning gloves that went up her arms to her elbow. It definitely took a little of the joy out of the victory. I mentioned earlier about her views on religion. She did not believe in God, but don't misunderstand me. While not religious, Myrna was one of the most Jewish people I've ever known, not in following customs or practices that she felt were archaic, but in her deep, deep love for the Jewish people and their history. And the things she loved so very deeply, terrified for any harm that might befall them. I remember when Lisa first announced to her that she was pregnant with Rachel. We were somewhat taken back by the lack of exuberant response. There were no exclamation of joy. Her reaction was very muted. We found out later that day that upon hearing of the pregnancy, all she could immediately think of was that here was something else that she would love so much that she would always be worried about its safety. That was Myrna to a T. If she loved you, it meant that she was continually worried about you and for you. Her love was unconditional to you, but carried a heavy weight for her. She felt a deep responsibility for those she loved. She would protect you, safeguard you, nurture you, and assist you in any way she possibly could, sometimes with the all-knowing, sometimes without. Myrna was love, but the love she gave, both the love she gave and the love we all felt for her. We will all love her forever. Thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon. I'm Harold Moskowitz, and first, my wife Jan and I would like to express our deep condolences to both the Thomas and Paul families. And I'll turn the mic over to Jan.
Everything that has been said has been so beautiful and so wonderful that I hesitate to continue. But I've been told I have to. And I want to. I first met Myrna when we were student teachers together in PS 219. It was my alma mater, so it was a return home for me, especially with my 6th grade teacher, Martha Thomas. And it was a fun reunion with Martha, and we became friends, and of course, she eventually introduced Myrna to her son, Neil. And I was engaged to Hal at the time. We decided to go out to dinner together. Myrna told me her trepidation before the meeting. After all, Hal was a medical student. She didn't know what Neil would do. They took one look at each other, fell madly in love, and and that is how it remained for the next 50 years. They danced around telephone poles. They had wonderful times together. She needn't have worried. Our teaching career started at PS 115. Myrna picked me up the first day in her car. We drove to school, found a wonderful parking space across the street, and spent the next 20 minutes with Myrna trying to get into the spot. Everybody in school watching and laughing, including her very beloved principal, Alvin Broido. Things only became better after that. I transferred to 72. At the end of the year, Myrna stayed at 115 and became the best teacher in the school. I apologize to all of you here, but that is my view. She was dedicated, creative, understanding, and had all the best qualities a teacher should have. Mentored many of her students, Linda, with whom she had firm relationships that lasted all their adult lives. We all remained best friends for the early years until we moved to Connecticut. Even though we saw each other then, we saw each other when we could. Spent weekends with them in New York, at theaters, saved our money for the great restaurants on special occasions, and spent many late nights playing hearts, Scrabble, Neil and I. He doesn't spell. and Myrna doesn't play.
One of the few people who can hold their own with Neil.
And just reading the New York Times at 3 a.m. Some of our best times were spent in upstate New York. She and Neil, their beloved Luzerne, and we were in Warrensburg. Myrna shone at all she attempted. She became a baker par excellence. With trays of cream puffs, cheesecakes, mousse cakes, all goodies she produced in great quantities to please everyone. For herself, she preferred oven juice. Give her a blackout cake anytime. And she ordered cartons and cartons of Hostess cupcakes to satisfy her daughter Lisa's craving. Myrna loved her home. She was very proud, took great interest in its care, and was very proud of its decorating, which she did very well. She trained herself to be a painter, a wallpaper hanger, an electrician, a carpenter, a plumber, all things Neil refused to participate in. But most of all, she loved her family, her children, her grandchildren, and she adored Neil. His death was a blow from which she never quite recovered. They were our closest friends, and Myrna's passing puts an end to a major chapter in our lives. We will always love them and think of them and miss them greatly. Thank you.
And just, Neil and Myrna were an integral part of all our lives for many, many years. I remember when Lisa was born in the corner of the crib. I used to stand and watch her actually in the corner. But they were our best friends, and we will miss them a great deal. And I hope she has found rest. The last 2 years have been very difficult and taken away a lot of what she was. But I hope where she is, in spite of what some people feel, I hope she is reunited with the people she loved, Neil, as well as her mother and father. Thank you all.
When I was a teenager, I needed to have blood drawn for some minor medical tests. It was the first time that I ever had to do this, and I was a little frightened of the procedure. The technician was new and inexperienced, and she was unable to get the job done on her first try. Before she could attempt it again, My mother insisted that the technician practice on her. She willingly offered herself as a human pincushion to prevent me from experiencing any unnecessary pain. That was typical Myrna. I can stand up here and tell you more stories about how wonderful Myrna was, but you already know that from being her friend or from hearing about her today. Instead, I thought I would share with you a list that our family made years ago when we were all together in Disney World for Neil's 70th birthday. We were joking about things we would never expect Myrna and Neil to say. Myrna's list included the following. Neil, let's sell the house and move to Florida. Please take my picture. I can't babysit for the grandchildren. I have to get my nails done. You know, I was wrong. George Bush is a hell of a president. It was Neil singing that made me fall in love with him. I can't wait to see the new Schwarzenegger film. The kids don't need any more toys or clothes. Not marinara again for dinner. 15%, it's a big enough tip. They say it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to care for someone with dementia. Myrna was adamantly opposed to having full-time care or to moving to an assisted living facility. We spoke to her several times a day, we visited frequently, but most of the time she was alone in her house. Her neighbors would invite her to dinner and to movies, take her shopping when she could no longer drive, sit through dinner after dinner at Marinara because that was where Myrna always wanted to go, and check in on her daily. Their actions made it possible for her to stay in the house that she loved for as long as she could. For that, we are thankful. Myrna's close friends would answer calls from her at all times, day and night, when she began to lose track of time. They never complained. They would listen patiently as she told the same story countless times, never saying a word to her. They accompanied her to doctor's appointments when we could not be there, encouraged her to go to book club when she was embarrassed about not having read the book, and let us know when they were concerned, offering suggestions as to what could be done. They reassured and comforted her when she was frightened and confused, and their love for her only deepened as her condition worsened. For that, we are thankful. Our friends have spent hours listening to us as we vented our anger and frustrations, expressed our fears and concerns, and questioned what to do. They provided sage advice, listened without judging, and let us know that we could count on them for whatever we needed. In many cases, they did so while dealing with the illness or death of their own parents. They have been there for us every step of this long ordeal, and for that, we are thankful. For the last year of her life, Myrna lived at the Greens of Greenwich, an assisted living facility for people with dementia. The staff treated her with tremendous respect and kindness and cared for her as if she were a member of their own family. They were great sources of support for us as well and made an incredibly difficult time a little bit easier for us. For that, we are thankful. My daughter Rachel had to witness her beloved grandmother slowly disappear before her eyes. She spent hours with Myrna whenever she was home from college, organizing items in the house to make things easier to find, watching some of Myrna's favorite movies with her, such as You've Got Mail or Sleepless in Seattle, and simply talking to her. She showed tremendous patience, compassion, understanding, and maturity. And for that, I am thankful. My husband Joel voluntarily shouldered the lion's share of Myrna's care. When Myrna could no longer handle her own finances, Joel took over paying all her bills. When she kept forgetting how to use the answering machine or computer or TV, Joel would patiently show her and would write out instructions, and then he'd write them out again when they disappeared. When Myrna needed part-time help, Joel took care of finding the aides. When it became clear that she would need to go into assisted living, Joel spent hours researching facilities. He has handled all of the insurance and legal issues and dealt with everything related to the house. He has been been my rock throughout this long, difficult time, and for all that he has done and all that he continues to do. I am extraordinarily thankful. Above all, I am thankful for my mother, for everything she did and everything she was. Joel, Rachel, and I will sit Shiva at our house in Rybrook tonight from 5:30 until 9, and I will be home tomorrow, and I welcome anybody who would like to stop by. Russ and I and our families will remain here in the adjoining room for a while for those who would like to share memories of Myrna with us. Thank you for being here today and for being a part of Myrna's life.